In this last video, I told you Richard brought me 3 plastic bags of medications into my office and insisted he knew exactly what everything was. He was so sure that he was right. Did I really have the courage to question him? Then I found the first sign that something was wrong, terribly wrong. Richard was taking Louise's hormone replacement pills. Yes, he was taking estrogen. When I asked him about them, he insisted that they were his. Not maybe his, not maybe, I'm not sure, his. He swore they were his. In fact, he told me that his doctor had said that if he ever stopped taking them, he would die. That was his level of certainty. Do I challenge this or do I let it slide? Well, welcome back to the Richard and Louise Family Story, a 4-part caregiving series where I take you over my shoulder and show you what really happens inside a family when aging starts changing everything. This is part 2 of 4. And if you missed the earlier video, go back and start there. It's a true story. Hi, I'm Suzanne Fasella, a retired physician assistant and healthcare advocate who teaches family caregivers how to go from emotional chaos to strong leadership in senior care with more confidence, less exhaustion, and the right resources. I don't fix problems. I teach caregivers how to fix their own problems. Now, when people hear stories like this, they sometimes imagine that the doctor should correct everything right there in the exam room. But that is not the case. Real life is rarely that tidy. If I had pushed too hard in that moment with Richard, I would have lost Richard's trust. And if I lost that, I would lose any chance of helping Louise too. So I kept going. I moved right on. Then I found the estrogen cream. Richard told me that that one belonged to Louise, and he explained that he rubbed it in her every night because the doctor wanted him to. Louise sat there quietly. She did not talk. She did not seem to understand where she was. She mostly watched Richard. Remember, Louise had late-stage dementia. So this was concerning. But because Alan, their distant son, had already given me background before the visit, I was seeing this through a much wider lens. I didn't have to guess. This was not just a husband helping his wife. This was a fragile caregiving arrangement being managed by a man who was more confused than he realized. This is what makes these cases so hard. The danger is not always dramatic. It does not always scream at you. Sometimes it just shows up as misplaced confidence, a mixed up pill bottle, a cream used routinely when maybe it shouldn't be. With this case, I had a caregiver insisting everything is under control while the facts quietly say otherwise. People often look for one giant red flag, but many times the truth arrives as 100 smaller signs that something is not safe anymore. And at that point, I had to ask one more question. I stopped. This was a question I did not want to ask, but as a medical provider, I had to. I said, Richard, how often are you and your wife intimate? And he told me that it was frequent. And that answer sat heavily with me. Why? Because Louise had late-stage dementia. She was not participating in the visit in any meaningful way. She did not know where she was. She did not speak. She mostly watched Richard and followed his lead. So now I was no longer just looking at medication, confusion, confidence in Richard, but I was looking at a much harder reality. I was not sure Louise was capable of consent, and that weighed on me. I did not say every thought I had in that moment, Sometimes medicine is not about blurting out every concern the second you have them. I couldn't do that. Sometimes it is about understanding what can be handled in the room, excuse me, and what cannot, and who needs to be brought in next. Fortunately, I knew Richard's primary doctor personally because I worked in his office. Afterward, I shared with him what was going on. I told him the facts. He understood the seriousness of it. He assured me that he would talk to both Richard and Louise, since they were both his patients. He could set up an appointment with them. This couple needed more than advice. So I left Richard's appointment with one very clear thought. This was not a one-visit fix. This was not going to be solved by one medication review, one lecture, or one son living in another state asking for updates. They needed what we call in medicine eyes on. Eyes on simply means someone has to actually see what is happening, not just hear about it over the phone, glance at a chart, or make assumptions from one appointment. Because if this much was visible in my exam room, I could only imagine what was happening at home. And I know one thing for sure, one appointment with me was never going to be enough to hold this situation together. That's the type of physician assistant I was and I practiced. So in the next video, I'll tell you what I did to start turning Richard around to reason. Take care. I'll see you soon. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and share it. Bye-bye.